A sun broke through the blinds in thin golden stripes across my kitchen table. My phone rang with a hesitation that didn't feel normal. It wasn't the sharp, confident ring my son usually used when he called on weekends. This one was slow, almost guilty. I wiped my hands on a towel, still warm from washing dishes, and picked up the phone without thinking too much of it. I had no idea that the next sentence would shake my world in a way I hadn't seen coming, not even in my darkest guesses. "Mom," my son said, voice tight, as if he was bracing for a storm. "We moved to another state because Maya didn't like it here, and," he swallowed, "we forgot to tell you." For a second, I didn't respond. Not because I was angry yet, not because I couldn't believe it, though disbelief wrapped itself around me like ice, but because something inside me shut down in that slow, painful way that only happens when someone you love slices you open without realizing it. "You forgot?" I whispered. My fingers tightened on the phone. The kitchen suddenly felt too quiet, too still, like the world itself was holding its breath for my reaction. "Mom, listen," he said quickly. "It all happened really fast, okay? Maya wasn't happy. She didn't want to stay in this state anymore. She said it was depressing. She wanted to start fresh somewhere else. And you know how she gets when she's uncomfortable." I closed my eyes. Yes, I knew. I knew her sharp remarks, her little jads disguised as jokes, the way she rolled her eyes when I tried to help, the way she clung to my son like she was protecting him from me instead of embracing the family he came from. But even then, even with all her flaws, I never imagined she'd take him away without a goodbye, without a visit, without a single conversation. "Where are you?" I asked. He hesitated, long enough to confirm what my heart already knew. He wasn't the one making decisions anymore. "Arizona," he finally said. "We moved last night." Last night, meaning that while I was sitting on my couch, knitting a blanket for their future child, smiling at the thought of becoming a grandmother. They were packing boxes, loading trunks, locking doors, leaving the state entirely. And none of them thought to call me. Not even a text, not even a message left in the middle of the night. Not even a note. "Mom," he added quickly, "don't take it personally. It just happened. And honestly, we'll visit sometime soon. Maybe next year." Next year. The words punched me harder than anything. That was when I realized he didn't see what had been taken from me. My place in his life, my dignity, my importance. I realized he didn't understand the betrayal because he wasn't the one being cut off. He was the one doing the cutting. "I need a moment," I said quietly, steadying my voice. "We'll talk later." I hung up before he could respond. And for several minutes, I simply stood there, staring at the blank wall in front of me, trying to understand how a son I raised with love, with sleepless nights, with sacrifices I never spoke of, could casually tell me he disappeared across state lines like he was announcing a weather update. But then something shifted inside me, slowly, strongly, something that had been quiet for years. Strength. Not the soft, grandmotherly strength I'd always used, the one that forgives, accommodates, and bends so others don't feel discomfort. No. This was a different kind of strength. The kind a woman discovers when she realizes she's been dismissed, disrespected, and replaced. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that acts. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. Then, with a calmness that surprised even me, I reached for my landline phone, not the cell, not the one filled with pictures of my son and his wife, smiling at holidays, but the old, heavy phone I used when I meant business. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years, because until this moment, I didn't need to. "Yes?" A familiar voice answered. "Attorney Malcolm speaking." "Malcolm," I said, straightening my spine. I need to make immediate changes to my will. There was a pause, a long one. Of course, Evelyn. May I ask what prompted this sudden decision? My son, I said, voice steady. He made a choice today that has changed the future of this family. Now I will make mine. But before I continue, if you love dramatic, real-life stories, shocking twists, and revenge that hits exactly where it hurts, make sure you subscribe. Every story here is crafted to keep you hooked, emotional, and at the edge of your seat. Now, back to the moment everything changed. I sat down at my dining table, the very one where I had celebrated birthdays, baked cookies with a little boy who used to call me his best friend, and decorated gingerbread houses during Christmas. But that little boy was gone now, replaced by a man controlled by someone who didn't want me in their life. For years, I had been patient. I had looked at things from all angles. I had tried to be the bigger person. But what happens when being the bigger person only makes you invisible? What happens when all your softness becomes permission for people to treat you as optional? I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to hope they'd return. If they wanted distance, fine. But that distance would cost them something they could never replace. My legacy, my estate, my generational wealth, which I spent decades building through 2 jobs, sleepless nights, and sacrifices they knew nothing about. The future I had planned for them was about to shift in a direction none of them would see coming. And as I waited for my attorney to pick up the video call, I whispered to myself, if they chose a new life without me, then they can live it without the benefits that came from me. And that was the moment the true revenge began. Malcolm's face appeared on the screen a few seconds later, older than I remembered, with more silver in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes, but still carrying that calm authority that made people sit straighter when they talked to him. Evelyn, he said warmly, it's been too long. What can I help you with today? I took a slow breath, studying the mess of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, disappointment, resolve, and something colder, sharper, like the stillness right before winter storms. I need to change everything in my will, I said, and I want it done as soon as possible. His brow lifted. That's quite urgent. Is everything all right? No, I replied honestly, but it will be. I could see the questions forming, but to his credit, Malcolm wasn't the type to pry into personal matters unless necessary. Still, I could tell he wanted context before rewriting an entire legacy. Would you like to explain what led to this decision? He asked carefully. I nodded, but not because I needed to justify myself, because speaking it out loud would make it real. My son called me this morning, I said. He told me he moved to Arizona last night without telling me. Because his wife didn't like this state, Malcolm's expression didn't change much. He was too professional, but his silence spoke for him. Shock, disbelief, a subtle flare of indignation on my behalf. He said they forgot to tell me, I continued, biting back the bitterness. They forgot Malcolm, forgot their mother existed, forgot the woman who raised him, forgot I lived 10 minutes away and could have hugged him goodbye. I folded my hands tightly in my lap, but I didn't forget anything. Not the sacrifices, not the late-night shifts, not the years I spent building a life he benefited from. If he wants a fresh start so badly, then he'll get one. A fresh start without the inheritance he assumed was guaranteed. Malcolm leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. I understand, he said. What changes would you like to make? All of it, I said firmly. Every asset, every investment, every property, I want it removed from his name. And instead, I want it redirected somewhere meaningful, somewhere appreciated. Malcolm nodded slowly, taking notes. Do you want to designate a new beneficiary? I hesitated, Not because I didn't know the answer, but because the answer came from a place deeper than anger. It came from clarity. Yes, I said, but not a person. He glanced up, curious. A foundation? Something like that, I said. A scholarship fund, maybe. One that helps students who don't have family support. Kids who'd give anything for someone to believe in them. Because that feels like a better legacy than giving everything to people who treat me like a burden. Malcolm wrote quickly, nodding with understanding. We can do that. You have more than enough assets to create something substantial. Something lasting. Good, I said. That's what I want. And I want these changes notarized today. As he arranged the documents, something unexpected settled over me. Not sadness, not anger, but relief. Like a weight I had been carrying for years without noticing had finally slipped off my shoulders. For so long, I had twisted myself into someone easy to accept, easy to handle, easy to overlook. But being overlooked was exactly how I ended up here, finding out through a rushed morning call that I didn't matter enough to inform, invite, or consider. No more. Not again. When Malcolm finished preparing the paperwork, he looked at me with a gentle seriousness. Evelyn, once this is signed, it's final. Are you sure? More sure than I've been about anything lately, I said. My son made his decision last night. This is mine. After the call ended, I sat alone in my living room, absorbing the silence around me. It wasn't the same silence from earlier. The shocked, wounded quiet that felt like it could swallow me whole. This silence was different. Clean. Controlled. Powerful. I stood up and walked to the hallway closet. Inside, on the top shelf, sat a small wooden box carved with roses, something I made years ago during a woodworking class. Inside it were memories, my son's old paper drawings, a bracelet he made in school, a photograph of us on his graduation day. I took the box down gently and placed it on the dining table. For a long moment, I simply stared at it. So much love lived inside that box. So many pieces of a boy who used to run into my arms after school, who used to sit beside me on the porch steps eating popsicles, who used to say he'd take care of me when I got old. When did he stop being that boy? When did he choose someone who saw me as an obstacle instead of family? Or maybe he didn't choose. Maybe he simply followed the loudest voice in his life. That hurt even more. But pain wasn't going to control me. Not today. Not anymore. I opened the box and took the graduation photo out, running my thumb along the edges. Then I exhaled slowly, placed it back inside, and closed the lid. I love you, I whispered into the quiet room. But I love myself too. And loving myself meant drawing lines. Hard ones. Strong ones. Lines that couldn't be erased by excuses or apologies made too late. A notification pinged on my phone, an email from Malcolm. The documents were ready for signing, but before leaving, I looked around my house. The home my son used to sprint through laughing. The home I imagined would someday be filled with grandchildren's footsteps. Now it felt different, not empty, but evolving. Transforming into something that belonged fully to me. I grabbed my purse, fixed my hair in the hallway mirror, and left the house with a calm, purposeful stride. As I stepped outside, a thought crossed my mind. Cold, honest, and true. They left without telling me, but they were about to learn what leaving really meant. The drive to Malcolm's office felt different this time. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't shaky. I wasn't drowning in regret or fear of consequence. Instead, I drove with the windows cracked open, letting the early breeze brush against my face, clearing away the last traces of emotional fog. It felt like shedding a skin I had worn for too long, a skin of silence, of tolerance, of shrinking myself so others could feel bigger. No more. When I arrived, Malcolm greeted me in the lobby with his usual composed smile, but his eyes carried a softness that felt almost parental. "Everything is set up," he said, leading me inside. "Let's go through each page just to make sure it reflects exactly what you want." We walked into his office, a room filled with leather-bound law books, framed certificates, and an air of decisions that changed people's destinies. Today, it would change mine too. He laid out the documents on the table, page by page, the new foundation, the transfer of assets, the legal removal of my son's inheritance. All typed, notarized, prepared, ready for my final approval. As I read through the details, a strange sense of empowerment washed over me. Not vengeance, though there was a sharp satisfaction deep inside, but something deeper. Control. Finally, control over my own story. "I want to add one more note," I said, tapping a paragraph with my finger. "Something specific." "Of course," Malcolm replied. "What would you like to include?" "A clause," I said, "stating that under no conditions, none whatsoever, can my son or his wife contest this will. No appeals, no loopholes." Malcolm nodded and added it swiftly. "Understood." When everything was exactly as I envisioned, he handed me a pen. A simple gesture, yet powerful, life-changing. I gripped it firmly and signed my name across the final page with a steady hand. The moment the ink dried, a quiet thunder rolled through me. Not fear, not doubt, just certainty. It was done. "Evelyn," Malcolm said gently as he gathered the papers, "you're doing what's best for your peace." "I know," I replied, "and for once, I'm choosing myself." He nodded respectfully. "If you ever need anything else, my door is always open." As I left the office, a small group of people passed me, chatting, laughing, going about their lives. I watched them for a moment, thinking about the strange cruelty of family dynamics. You raise a child with love so big, it feels endless. You picture holidays together, birthday candles, grandchildren laughing in your backyard. But no one prepares you for the moment when that child grows up and becomes someone else's priority, someone who may not value you. No one warns you that family, the thing you build with your whole heart, might one day treat you as optional. But I refused to let optional be my identity. I got back into my car and drove toward the local park. Not because I needed to clear my head. I had clarity for the first time in years, but because I needed a moment to think about what came next. Not the legal side, that part was already handled. The emotional aftermath, the unavoidable phone call, because sooner or later my son would find out. And when he did, my phone would erupt with messages, apologies, demands, justifications, and eventually anger. Lots of anger. But that was a storm for another day. Today, I wanted a moment of peace. The park was quiet at this hour, with only a few people walking dogs or jogging along the trail. I sat on a wooden bench beneath a large oak tree that had probably lived longer than every mistake I ever made. The wind rustled through the leaves above me, and for a moment I felt a deep, grounding calm. I looked around at the children playing on the swings, their joyful screams filling the air, and I couldn't help but imagine the future grandchildren I might never meet now. It stung. Of course it did. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Loving someone doesn't mean surrendering your worth. I took my phone out and stared at the screen. No messages. No missed calls. Of course not. They were too busy unpacking their new home, celebrating their fresh start. My son was probably carrying boxes, thinking everything in his life was under control, unaware that the foundation beneath him had just shifted. And Maya, well, if she hated this state so much, she was about to find out what hating the wrong person's state could cost her. As I sat there, a memory surfaced from years ago. My son at 15, frustrated over a friend who betrayed him. I remembered what I told him then. People treat you the way you allow them to. If you teach someone that you'll tolerate disrespect, they'll give you more of it. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear those words now. The sun climbed higher, warming the bench beneath me. For the first time that day, I let myself smile. A small, calm smile. Not joyful, not triumphant, but steady. Because I knew something my son didn't yet know. You can move states. You can run from discomfort. You can even run from people. But you cannot run from consequences. An older couple walked by, hand in hand, and the woman, gray-haired, wearing a soft pink sweater, gave me a gentle nod. Something about that small gesture warmed my chest. Life wasn't over for me. Loneliness wasn't my destiny. And being a mother didn't mean being a doormat. After a while, I stood up and headed back home. As I walked to my car, I whispered something to myself. A vow. They may have left without telling me, I said softly. But one day, they will feel the silence of being left out. And not just left out of my life, left out of the future they assumed was theirs. By the time I arrived home, the sky had shifted into that soft afternoon glow. The kind that makes the world look gentler than it really is. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside, feeling the stillness wrap around me like a thin blanket. The house felt different now. Not emptier, just quieter in a way that didn't ache anymore. It felt like a place where I could breathe without being afraid of stepping wrong, speaking wrong, or being wrong in someone else's eyes. But the peace didn't last long. As soon as I set my purse on the counter, my phone buzzed. A text from my son. For a split second, something inside me tightened. Old habits, old hopes, but I forced myself to stay steady. I picked up the phone and read the message. Mom, sorry about earlier. Things are just chaotic. We're trying to settle in. Chaotic. Settling in. Words that sounded innocent, even normal. Words meant to soften the blow of their decision. To make abandonment feel like an accident instead of a choice. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed space. Space to realize that his apology didn't address anything. Not the disrespect, not the secrecy, not the betrayal. Just chaos. Another message came seconds later. Maya wants you to understand it wasn't personal. She was really unhappy there. She's been anxious for months. I let out a slow breath. Anxiety? Unhappy? I had lived decades of battles, heartbreak, financial strain, raising a child alone, rebuilding my life after every storm. And never once did I abandon someone who loved me, just because I was unhappy in a state. But Maya had always lived in a world where she was the sun, and everyone else rotated around her comfort, including my son. The phone buzzed again. We'll visit soon, promise. A hollow promise, one made out of obligation, not love. I put the phone face down on the table and walked into the living room, where the late afternoon light spilled across the carpet. I sat on the edge of the sofa, fingers interlocked, staring at the quiet room. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry. But another, the strongest part, remained still. Because while they were texting me empty promises, I had already altered the one thing they cared about without knowing it. Their future. The estate. The inheritance. The stability they had assumed would always be waiting for them. Gone. redirected, rewritten. Not out of spite, but out of dignity. I stood up and walked to the window, watching a group of teenagers skateboard past my house, laughing without a care in the world. I wondered, briefly, what they would think if they knew how fragile family bonds could be when selfishness enters the picture. How easily a lifetime of love could be overshadowed by one person's need for control. My phone buzzed again, breaking my thoughts. This time, Maya. A message from her was rare, and usually only came when she needed something. I hesitated, then opened it. Hi, Evelyn. I hope you're not upset. This move is better for us. The environment was affecting my mental health. I'm sure you understand. I closed my eyes. I'm sure you understand. The same phrase she used the day she told me she didn't want me visiting too often. The same phrase she used when she insisted holidays should be just the two of them. The phrase she hid behind every time she pushed me farther out of their life. For years, I tried to understand. I bent myself in half, trying to be considerate, trying not to step on her delicate ego, trying not to give her a reason to push me further away. But in the end, she didn't need a reason. She just wanted distance. And now she had it. I typed a single response. I'm glad the move works for you. Take care. Polite, neutral, unemotional. A message that said nothing, promised nothing, expected nothing. Before I could second guess it, I pressed send. Almost immediately, 3 dots appeared. Maya typing. Then they stopped. Started again. Stopped. Finally, her message arrived. You seem upset. I ignored it, because the truth was, I wasn't upset anymore. Not in the way she thought. I wasn't fragile, offended, or begging for inclusion. I wasn't scrambling for their approval. For the first time in a very long time, I was detached. And detachment, I realized, was far more powerful than anger. I walked into the hallway and paused in front of a framed photo of my son and me from years ago. He was smiling so brightly, head leaned against mine, arms wrapped around me like he never wanted to grow up and leave. I touched the glass lightly. I hope you find your happiness, I whispered, but I hope you learn what loyalty feels like too. Because life has a way of teaching lessons you don't expect. And mine was about to teach him one. The sun dipped lower, and I moved to the kitchen to make myself tea. As the water boiled, I replayed the morning phone call in my head. The brief shock, the hollow apology, the casual justification. It was surreal how a single conversation could break a bond, yet also reveal its true strength. Family wasn't defined by blood. It was defined by respect, and they had none left to give. I poured the tea into a cup painted with tiny violets. One my son bought me years ago when he was still thoughtful, still attached. I held it between my hands, letting the warmth seep into my palms. Then, slowly, a new thought entered my mind. What would happen when they finally realized everything had changed? When they learned the estate was gone? When they discovered the life they planned to lean on no longer existed? Would they blame me? Would they try to come back? Would they finally understand the weight of their choices? I didn't know. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would feel it. Every decision has a consequence. Every abandonment has an echo. And theirs was already on its way. As evening settled in, the air turned cooler, and I wrapped a light shawl around my shoulders. I walked out onto the porch, watching the sky shift from gold to amber to a soft lavender gray. A peaceful ending to a chaotic day. But not the ending of this story. No, the real ending was still coming. And when it arrived, it would deliver a lesson no one in their new home would ever forget. The next morning, I woke before the sun even had the chance to stretch across the horizon. My sleep had been shallow, drifting in and out of dreams that didn't feel like dreams at all. More like echoes of thoughts I wasn't ready to fully face. I lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the house, feeling something different in the air. Not unease, not sadness, something sharper. A sense of certainty that had not existed in me for years. When I finally rose from bed, the world outside was still tinted blue from the night. I wrapped my robe around me and walked to the kitchen. As I filled the kettle, the faint reflection of myself in the microwave door caught my eye. I looked, calmer than I expected. Not a woman broken by abandonment, not a mother devastated by distance, but someone who had reclaimed the part of herself she had tucked away the moment she became mom, the caregiver, the peacekeeper, the one who always swallowed her pain so others could breathe easier. Not anymore. The kettle whistled softly. I poured my tea and stepped onto the porch, the early breeze brushing against my cheeks. The neighborhood was still asleep, except for one jogger in a neon vest bouncing along the sidewalk. I took a sip of tea and stared into the fading darkness. A strange thought crossed my mind, a thought so unexpected I almost laughed. I didn't miss them. I missed who they used to be. I missed the idea of family. I missed the fantasy of being appreciated. But them? The versions of themselves who could move states without a goodbye. Who justified betrayal with, "It wasn't personal"? Who left me here to rebuild my heart alone? No, I didn't miss them at all. Just as I set my cup down, my phone buzzed inside the house. I didn't rush to get it. The old me would have jolted up, hoping it was them needing me, wanting me, remembering I existed. But the new me walked inside with steady steps. The message was from my son again. "Mom, are you awake? Can we talk?" Talk. The word felt heavy, like it carried the weight of years he never apologized for. I typed a simple reply, "I'm awake." Seconds later, my phone rang. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Mom?" His voice was rushed, uneven. Not confident like before. Not careless. A tone I hadn't heard from him since he was young, uncertain. "Yes, I'm here," I said quietly. I wanted to explain yesterday better." Explain. A softer word for justify. For rewrite. For cushion. I didn't say anything, and the silence made him fill the space. "Look, the move happened fast. Maya wanted it. She was overwhelmed. You know how she gets. And I didn't want to make things worse by arguing with her." There it was, his truth. Not that he supported the decision. Not that he believed in it. But that he feared conflict with his wife more than the thought of hurting the woman who raised him. "Mom, I didn't mean to make you feel forgotten." But I was forgotten. That was the part he still refused to admit. "I understand," I replied. Simple, calm. He exhaled in relief, misunderstanding the meaning behind my words completely. "I knew you'd be reasonable," he said. "Listen, we'll visit once we settle in. Maybe by summer." Summer. Months away. Months from a mother he moved away from overnight. "All right," I said. Another sigh of relief. As if he believed this tiny conversation patched a wound he inflicted with the precision of a surgeon. "Good. Maya will be happy to hear that," he added. Of course she would. Because in her mind, she hadn't done anything wrong. She had simply rearranged lives to suit her comfort, an ability she had perfected over the years. "I have to go," I said. "I have appointments today." "Oh, what kind of appointments? I'll talk to you later. And I hung up. For several seconds, I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it was a portal into a life I no longer belonged to. Something inside me shifted again. Not pain this time, not anger, just a deeper understanding. He wasn't coming back, not truly, not emotionally, not as the son I knew. And I wasn't waiting for him anymore. Just then, the doorbell rang. I blinked, surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a woman stood there, holding a large envelope, short, with streaks of silver in her hair and glasses that magnified her eyes into gentle owl-like circles. "Good morning," she said kindly. "I'm from Malcolm's office. He asked me to deliver these to you personally. Copies of the finalized documents. Ah, my new will. My new legacy. My new beginning. Thank you," I said, taking the envelope. She hesitated before speaking again. "And, if I may, he asked me to tell you he admires your strength." A small, almost shy smile tugged at my lips. "Please tell him thank you." When she left, I placed the envelope on the dining table. The weight of it felt symbolic, not heavy, but grounded, firm. A physical representation of a decision that would shape the rest of my life, and theirs. Later that afternoon, as I sat in my living room, reviewing the documents, the doorbell rang again. This time, louder, faster, impatient. I froze for a heartbeat, then another. A sudden thought stabbed through my mind. No, it couldn't be. They weren't here. They couldn't be here. But the pounding came again. 3 sharp knocks, urgent and demanding. I stood up slowly, my pulse picking up speed as I walked toward the door. For a moment, the old fear crept in, the fear of conflict, the fear of confrontation, the fear of disappointing someone who never worried about disappointing me. But I pushed it down and opened the door. And there, on my porch, was Maya. Her hair messy, eyes wild, breath uneven as if she'd been running. And behind her stood my son, his expression a twisted mixture of panic and disbelief. "Mom," he started. But Maya stepped forward, voice trembling with fury. "What," she hissed, "did you do?" I stood frozen for a heartbeat, the morning sun streaming through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the porch. Maya's glare was sharp, almost feral, and Daniel's face carried the panic of a man realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. "What? What did you do?" Maya demanded again, her voice shaking. I took a slow breath, letting the calm I had carefully nurtured over the past day settle over me like armor. "I did exactly what needed to be done," I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. "Everything you assumed was guaranteed is gone, redirected, rewritten." Daniel stepped forward, his words faltering. "Mom, wait, this isn't. You can't." "I can," I interrupted gently. "Because for decades, I gave you my time, my love, my sacrifices. And for decades, you ignored me. You left without a word. You assumed loyalty, respect, and inheritance would always be automatic. You were wrong." Maya's lips trembled, and I could see the first flicker of panic in her eyes. "But it's just a will. You can't." "It's more than a will," I said, voice soft but sharp, like ice on glass. "It's my decision, my family's legacy, my peace, and you made the choice to step out of my life. Now you get to live with the consequences." Daniel's shoulders slumped, a subtle recognition of defeat. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as if searching for words that wouldn't undo what had been done. Maya's fury rose, but it was laced with fear. Fear of a reality she had never considered. a world where she and Daniel didn't control the narrative. I stepped back, letting the sunlight catch the lines of my face. You wanted a fresh start. Fine, you got it. Just know that it doesn't come with the handouts, the safety net, or the blind loyalty you assumed would always be waiting. Maya's eyes widened as the weight of my words sank in. Daniel looked like he might crumble under the quiet power radiating from me. I let the silence stretch. Long enough for them to feel it. Long enough for the truth to settle like dust in a sunbeam. Then I smiled. Small, calm, unwavering. Not out of cruelty, but certainty. I had taken back what was mine. I had drawn the line. And for the first time in decades, I felt whole. Now, I said softly, almost kindly, I suggest you leave. Because the next time we meet, it won't be about words. It will be about what you've lost. Daniel opened his mouth again. Maya reached out, but I didn't flinch. I closed the door slowly, the soft click echoing like a verdict. Outside, the morning breeze whispered through the trees. Inside, my home, my life, my legacy, everything I had built belonged entirely to me. And they would never forget it. The day had started with betrayal. It ended with clarity. And the lesson? Some losses are self-inflicted. And some victories, quiet, calculated, inevitable, are worth every second of waiting. Evelyn Hollins had chosen herself, and in that choice lay the power no one could take away.